Wrong week to quit sniffing glue.
Well, hello and welcome back. It is week four on the historic Big Enterprise build. And we're going to be doing some body work this week. Going to work on the nacelles, I think. That's something fairly easy to work on that doesn't rely on a bunch of other parts. Still waiting for Ralph's boards, but there's lots I can do while I'm waiting for that to happen. But today we're going to start with some body work on the underside. We're going to take a trip to the upside down today because we have got the ship on its back, and let's take a look. Okay, it's kipping on its back like the Norwegian blue, and working on this bottom. We're going to do some the red putty, spot putty today. And I am very happy with it. As rough as this was to start with, I am very happy with how smooth that has come out. But here is the problem child. This area here, where these two halves need to meet and where the fantail goes on, I need to take care of that joint toot sweet. And to do that, I've got a brand new jar or a brand new tube of the Bondo glazing and spot putty, and I'm just going to be smearing a coat on there with a squeegee, trying to get it all nice and smooth. And once that's happened, we can pick this up and move it away and start working on something else. But this is something that's going to have to set up and take a bit of time to dry. Okay, there's nothing uglier or messier than a big old sloppy red putty coating, but you can see it's something that has to be done. And it's easy enough to sand it back down. You just have to really cover that joint, feather it out to the edges as best you can, but realize that it's going to take some sanding to get to it. I've also used some epoxy putty this morning and kind of worked in this hole where I had carved it too far back. I just closed it up a bit, but all in all, I'm very happy with how tightly that joint has come together on the bottom. And I put some on the leading edge of the neck there. And I think what I'd like to do at this point is start deflecting, start working on the deflector. These are the parts needed. This is a very beautifully turned piece of aluminum, and it screws into the back there. It's very well done, very well thought out. What I'd like to do is perhaps seal that in there with magnets so that I can pop it off should I need to get to the electronics. I need to fit this piece, though. It needs to be sanded down because it's a little bit wider. By the time you squeeze the two halves together, this piece here takes some sanding to get in place. And then you'll putty the joints again. You can see here the joint I'm talking about. They include some of the inner side of these three grippers. I don't know the exact term, I'm sorry. But I sand those down a bit, and then we should be able, because this right here is some very good engineering. This fits inside of here so tightly. I mean, it fits it exactly. So this will give me my centering. Once this piece is, see how tough it is to come out? Once this piece is in, it will give me my centering for that piece, and then I can mark out where I want to put magnets and all that kind of stuff. So I need to, this is just going to be some delicate fitting and sanding and fitting and sanding, and to do that I probably need to get, because I want to do that flat, sand it flat all at one time, I will probably be using the belt sander, just, or the sanding disc, and then just, touch it up against, and then bring it back and fit it and touch it up against the sander, and, touching and fitting. But I can kind of do that while this is drying before I need to move it off of the table. Okay, I've got this front part on now, and I'm finding something kind of distressing, and that is that this tongue here is narrower than this bit. So I need to actually trim down. I've got everything lined up and centered, but I need to trim where this is sticking out too much. Looks okay on both sides, but on the bottom, maybe I squeezed those together too much. I don't know. That's how the kit was presented. So a little bit of sanding on this contours of this, and we'll be good. And you can see that fits in nice and snug and looks beautiful. Saucer's a little bit off center. We got to center, you know, square that up. But that looks beautiful. So let's pop this out, pop this off. And you can see the pencil marks there, how much has to come off. Easy enough to do. Just, you know, one of these little on-the-fly adjustments you got to make when you deal with a resin kit. You know, this piece fits in so tight and so perfectly, I don't know that I'm going to need magnets to hold it in place. I think we could just press fit it and it will be fine. It takes 2 hands to take it out, which means it's in nice and secure. I've got a little bit of wobble on the sensor dish. I can epoxy that in place and be done with it. But pulling it out and painting it might be the next step. Don't want to know how you get that far into painting the copper, but yeah, that may be the next thing to do. Again with the ugliness, but sometimes you got to walk through the valley of ugly to get to the meadows of beauty. And that is your Zen for the day. Okay, now while the Bondo is curing on the secondary hull, I want to take a minute to introduce you to a nacelle. Hello, nacelle. Say hi to the folks at home. Hi to the folks at home. Anyway, this is your nacelle. Bigger than your typical nacelle. Even your 350 nacelle is no small shakes on this. And let me tell you a bit how I received it in the kit from Jim Key, which has now been bought by another fine gentleman who I hope to get a replacement impulse deck casting clear so that I can light that. That'll be fun, but I digress. When I got these parts, they're heavy. These are heavy, substantial fiberglass pieces, cast just exactly the same way the secondary hull was, the way the saucer was, but a little bit thicker. And I got to tell you, one of the things that I was dreading the most about making an enterprise of this size, that fear was taken away from me, because these came already put together. The right and left halves of them were already glued. They were sanded a little bit. There's still some seam work that needs to be done here, some step between the right and left half that I can use Bondo to take care of. But this part was already done. And that anybody who's ever worked with, even with vacuform, that's a more extreme example of it, but vacuform knows that it's tough to put a long tube together and to get both sides to line up the whole way down the length and all that. But this was already done for me, and yay, and that's a very good thing. You'll see there's a weakness right in here, though, where a little bit of it broke out of the mold, and I'm going to fill that with some, not just the spot putty, but the actual Bondo to really strengthen that. And also, I don't know how well you can see down the barrel there, but I'm going to throw some additional Bondo around that pocket. I won't, the bad thing about this already being joined left and right is I can't get inside there to do a lot of work. Anything I need to do, I'm going to have to force in from the bottom or from the front or from the back and kind of position that way. So I'm hoping a long stick and some Bondo I can throw around that pocket to reinforce it. Not that I'm worried about it breaking or anything, but you know, I went through all that work to reinforce the secondary hull end of the pylon. It would make as much sense to reinforce that. But this is heavy, heavier than you might think it would be. And of course, you recognize, you may not recognize these by how big they are, but these are your intercoolers and your bit that goes there. And this is the brass that is meant to go in these channels to take care of that detail there. So we've got brass going in the front, and this is, no offense to Paul, but this is heavier brass than what he normally uses. And then the second piece goes in here. So you've got the brass, you've got, I mean, as far as model making, there's not a lot of parts to build here. You got that, you've got these two guys that go back here, and you see the poor stubs on here I've got to clean off. And then you've got the end cap that goes way back here, and I guess the ball was left off in case you were of a mind to put the hole patterns in here and not use the ball. So I will be using the ball because that's the look I was most familiar with, and that just keys in like that, and it'll have to be puttied in or epoxied in because there's a bit of a seam, but that goes on the end there. And that's Nacelle 101, Warp Engine 101. And of course you've seen the front of it, the bizarre collector that goes up in here. Now, this is where it gets tricky, because this is where my own I want to have fun thing comes into play. You see these pencil lines in here? Maybe you can see them shining in the lamp. I plan on cutting this out because I want to put blue lights behind it. Yes, I know. I hear you say, shocked. Lou, you're such a purist. Why would you put blue lights in there? Well, for two reasons. A, because I can. B, because I think it would look good. And C, I'm going to put them on a separate switch so that they don't come on unless I hit another switch. They're not going to be on all the time. But something this big, I've gotten so used to seeing blue lights on the inside of a warp nacelle that there's such an opportunity here to do it. The hole that I cut out here would be the width of a one string of blue. Well, it's right here. It would be the length of the blue strip light, or the width of a blue strip light. So I can make a little box, glue it from behind. You know, I've got more than enough room to run the wiring. That's just something I wanted to do, and I think it'll dress it up. But then again, it will, be on its own switch so that it does not interfere with the pure Canon look that I am aiming for. It'll be an addition. And I'm thinking also on that same addition, I don't know, I'm not 100% sold on it yet, but there has always been this little detail that goes at the top of there's a detail that goes at the top of the Bizarre Collector that is a little light. I don't believe it was ever lit, but there's the indicator that would be on this case it would be a red light, and on the other nacelle it would be a green light. And they got navigation lights. So that would be there, and maybe a strobe back here at the tail of the nacelle. Again, things that have shown up on later iterations of starships that weren't there on the classic Enterprise, but if I made them subtle enough and put them on their own switch, it would be like, okay, here's the Canon version, and then flip a switch, and here's what it would be were it made today. Because let's face it, if you were making this 100% Canon, you wouldn't even detail the starboard side of the ship. So that's the fun thing that I want to add to this. We'll see how well it goes, whether or not I end up abandoning the idea or not. This is my goal. I want to do this because I've got the room, I've got the materials, I think I've got the knowledge, and I think I want to add a little bit of fun to it. And now, one last thing before we get into the work here. You saw the building cradle. It's made out of chipwood, and it was cut and laser cut and provided by a man named Max Mills. And it is very excellent. It is everything you need to help align your nacelles and everything else. Well, Max has, I'm trying to make room here. He has provided more jigs than just that in his construction kit. And one of the fun things that he has provided is this guy. When you put it together, it looks like this. Well, it doesn't look like a lot until you put it in place, but what it does is it aligns. Oh, I realized I forgot to bring them. The little square bits that go here. It aligns, well, hold on, let me put it in place. Okay, this is basically what you do. You take this piece here and you align it to the center. And here is the center of this indent, is where the square bit would go. and it gives you a gluing guide. The gluing guide for the center blocks here, and for the intercoolers. It gives you the right and left. Again, I'd have to cut the pour spout out, but you do that, and it will help you align how they go down, because there is no indication on the nacelle itself about where these surface details go. The only indent you have is right here and here, and that's for this piece, which, you know, you're kind of dumb if you don't know where that's supposed to go. I hate to say it, but if you're building a kit this big and you don't know where this part goes, you shouldn't be building it. But, you know, getting these guys, getting the intercoolers lined up and square and all that could be a little bit more troublesome than you might think if you don't have this handy jig to help you with your placement, I guess, something like that. So that's going to be a tremendous help. There is one thing to do before I could put all of these in place, and that is I want to go down the edge of this seam with the Bondo, just to clean this up. There's a little bit you can see where that darkness is. That's the indent where I need to put some of the spot putty, and then we'll be able to hit this with a coat of primer. And spot putty, sand the seam, then attach the parts, and then hit it with a primer, because I want the parts to be primed in place. So I'm going to get out the Bondo and the real Bondo and take care of this indent, and then get the spot putty and take care of this. And I'll do it on both nacelles at the same time. Obviously, I'm only showing you one. Okay, now you can start to see what it looks like with some of the details laid in. There you go. Again, I've sanded these down, but it looks like they need to be pulled. There's an arc to them that I think that's going to need to be pulled down to flatten it against the edge of the nacelle. That's going to be fun. We're going to have to see how much epoxy that's going to take. It's going to end up splashing all over the grill pieces here, which are these grill pieces, which isn't going to be neat. But I don't want to put that on a sander and sand it flat, because that will lose too much of the detail, particularly up here. So pulling that down and epoxying it's going to be the only way to go. And of course this one, where is it? I got 1, 2, 3. This is the one that's got the busted front end on it. So I need to recreate, I'm sorry, busted front end on it. I need to recreate that detail. But maybe those jigs will help me take some of the bend out of the back. Let's see how that works. And this is what the jig looks like in place. It not only helps you to fit these down at the right angle, but also put these in the right place. Now, front to back, this needs to be moved a little bit. And the handy thing is at the back, it gives you the top dead center and the bottom dead center, which is handy because once you have those two measurements, you can determine what the outside dead center is, and that is going to help you with your placement of your pennant and your, you make those marks, and that's what you measure everything off of as far as being square, because these nacelles taper from the front to the back, so you can't get a true, there is no true level line except through the center of the nacelle. It's a mythical line. There's an actual line there, but I mean it's a line that goes from this point to that point. It is not top or bottom. Is not the center, or not the level. The level is in the middle of the tube, not at the top of the tube or the bottom of the tube. So before I get too glue happy, I want to go ahead and channel out that light area, and look at that. Whoops. Be careful, be careful. You don't want to swing anything around here. But this is what the brass channel looks like in place. It's slid a little bit forward. And then you've got the intercooler, you've got this big old piece here. But there you go. That's what your nacelle looks like in its native raw form. Now we just need to start attaching some of these. And I think this jig is going to be handy for marking where these intercoolers go, but I can't use it as a gluing jig because I do need to put some stress on that to pull it down. And whether that's going to be with, you know, a bunch of tape or rubber bands or what to pull that down, that's what's going to happen to take that bend off of it. Here are the important dimensions of this jig as far as keeping both of these square boxes square to each other, side to side, and keeping the orientation of the intercoolers not only correct at the back but correct at the front, keeping everything nice and parallel. It's a beautiful work of jiggery here, and my hat's off to you, sir. I appreciate a good jig when I see one. Alright, it's time to cut these channels out, but because this is fiberglass, that means taking it outside and gloving up and respirating up and doing all that kind of stuff. So I won't bore you with the details, but the next time you see it, these should be chopped out. Oh, good morning, welcome back. It is Tuesday, and let's play a little game of catch up to see where we are. I have been tweaking this important plane right here, and I sanded it and bondoed it and sanded it and bondoed it, and I'm ready to put another coat of primer over it to see what all of this has wrought. This joint here is looking particularly wonderful. Very happy with that. Want to get a coat of primer on that, but I am dangerously low on my can of filler primer, so quick trip to the auto parts store is on the agenda for this morning. I need to pick up some sandpaper and some filler primer and some primer sealer and all that. So quick trip out of there. Also working on the inner joint here because there was that, you know, the line you saw on the outside. Well, there's one on the inside as well. So a little bit of Bondo in there and some sanding. I need to replace some of these that have fallen off. But this is ready to go. The top part I've already sanded. It's ready for another coating. Been working on the nacelles, and let's go get those. Okay, here you can see the nacelles laid out. Where I'm at on these is that I have yesterday I did the coat of the actual Bondo, not the spot fill, but the actual Bondo, and sanded that. And then this morning I put a coat of the filler primer over top of that to see how much more needs to be done. And yes, I need to do a round of the more sanding to be done, and a round of the spot primer, this stuff, the glazing putty. So that has yet to be done. But I wanted you to see well, turn this around so that you can see it. The channel that I've cut out for the blue lighting, and that will be covered by this, designed to be covered by the photo etch, and then you'll have the light coming out behind that. Now this photo etch has yet to be painted the proper color. It is also not meant to be brass. Obviously it's meant to be silver, but that fits in something like that. And then I grab one of these, and then this goes over top of it like that. So what I'm thinking I'd like to get done today before I put the spot putty on it is I would like to go ahead and get the intercoolers and these. Alright, I would like to get these put on and the intercoolers put in place so that any spot puttying I can do will be done around that. But get those details put in today, and then I'll be ready to take this to the next step. I did some patchwork on this very rough opening here. It's going to be a treat to get the tops of the pylons to fit into them, because they are a little bit rough. They are even rougher than the openings in the secondary hull, so that's going to be a treat. So we'll see how well that goes. But that's what the jig is for. So the you set these in the jig, or you set the body in the jig, and then you fit the top of the nacelles to that. You know, it sounds like I am overhyping these building jigs, but I got to tell you, I'm not giving them any praise they don't deserve. They are so well thought out, it boggles the mind. This is the sound of my mind being boggled. They even the most tiny of details have been thought out. This distance here, see where the little nick is right there? This distance here, if you line that up and touch that to the back end of the back end of the nacelle, by the time you get through this spacer into here, that is the perfect distance between the back of these two details and the back of the nacelle. So all you need to do is line, see these first spacers here have pass-throughs in them. They have holes cut into them. But if you push that through, and even down to the point where something like this that you don't think would have a lot of detail to it, they've marked where the front is, so that make sure that that goes towards the front. But if you push that in to where it stops, not only is it square, but it is the correct distance from the back of the nacelle body. And the same thing happens here, because they both stop at the same point. So you line that up to where both of those touch, and you've got everything in the correct orientation, front to back and side to side. The only thing you need to do in advance is determine where the, this is tough to do, where the, probably the easiest thing to do is to lay it this way, where the exact center of this is. Because once you know where the exact center of this is, then you know that's the inmost point. You know, 90 degrees away from that is the top, 90 degrees away from it is the bottom, and everything else slots into place. So you take this, you take the little one on it that is marked in the center, you figure out your center line here, which isn't all that tough. You can gauge where the center of these details are, and you line, well, you push this in here to where this center line meets the center of this detail piece, and then Bob's your uncle. By doing that, all the other marks become aligned. So everything is squared off of that one measurement. You don't have to take a ton of a bunch of measurements to figure that out. So now that I've got that marked out, I could go ahead and glue these square pieces in and put the intercoolers in, because they fit just like this. Again, they touch that back wall, so they go as far back as those do. And then I need to squeeze that down just a little bit to take that bow out of the part, and put in the CA, and we're ready to go. We'll go ahead and do this on both of the nacelles, and then that will give me the last bit of construction that needs to get done. Now, I'm not counting gluing on the or attaching. I don't know if I'm going to glue on the Bassard collectors. That I may make those removable for maintenance. But oh, and there's also a back plate that goes on before the nacelle cap goes on. But it'll be a while before I get to those, because I need to get in and out of this. But I can go ahead and put these details down. Okay, so I have removed the jig. The jig is up. The jig is off. And you can see all of the intercoolers and the side panels in their proper place. This is the wooden replacement that I've carved to make up for the one that got broken off in the intervening years. Now you can see where it doesn't quite exactly match the contour, and you know, primer paint will fill some of that in, but I'm not afraid to go in there with a little bit of plastic putty and seal that in. Although I think I might be better off if I put maybe some epoxy in there to not only fill that gap but strengthen the joint. The instructions recommend putting pins in here, but I don't know what that gives me that gluing doesn't, or the jigs don't. I think obviously the instructions don't mention the jig because they don't count on you having that part of the jig. So they're doing it more primitively, I guess, and so they need the pins to give you better locations. But the jigs let you just slot them right in place, and they are good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other one now. Well, this just gets looking better and better. Back from lunch and having picked up more primer, and I just put a quick coat over that seam, and that's just looking sweet as can be now. Yeah, there's another pass I'm going to have to do up there on that joint, but like I say, it gets tough to see after so much sanding that you really need to put a coat of primer, just a unified gray all over it. Once that settles, I will flip it over and do the top seam. I have to replace a few windows that got blown off in the interim or sanded off, but that looks nice. And this is starting to look really nice here. Okay, I've got the red putty on the nacelles, and this will dry all the rest of the day, which is good news for Roy because that means I can get back to his project. And in the other room, the secondary hull is drying, and once that primer coat dries enough, I can flip it upside down, cover up some windows, and give the top seam another shot. It's like one step ahead of these guys because it's already had the spot putty put on it, and I'm just touching up the little bits of the ripple in the seams, and this is only on its first spot putty, which means it will be sanded and probably get one more coat of spot putty after that to get its final shape. But these were in pretty good shape to start with, so it's not like it's got that far to go. And here you can see the top of these pylons I've been working on. If you look at, now if I do that it's going to fall over. You'll notice if you look at this one, it is nice. It is a single flat plane, no bumps, no humps there, just a little bit of a lip there. I have fit the nacelle on here and it fits very cleanly, very nicely. And then when you get to the port pylon, you'll notice that this seems to be on a little bit of a twisted angle. So I am sanding this down, and even more so on the outside, you can tell that it is not, that there's a lip right here. It is not on the same plane. Let me move that lamp out of the way. Maybe that'll be easier to tell. It just looks like there's a bump right there that I have to sand down. I don't know if I've ever showed you these before, but they have a substantial metal armature inside them, so they are not going to bend or twist or sag. But no sense trying to bake in a twist that I'm going to have to try to get rid of, so I'm going to sand that down. If it makes this peg a little small in the pocket, that's fine, because I plan on filling that pocket with epoxy anyway, and I've got the jig to set it on to give it the right orientation. It's just that it's just an unevenness that I need to get rid of. And then by that time this should be dry enough or cured enough that I can put one last coat of paint on here this afternoon and call it a done day. Righty, now it's a little after 6. We're into that part of summer where it's just too blinking hot to work outside during the heat of the day, so I waited till it started to cool down a little before I brought the secondary hull out here to get another coat of primer on it. And I'm amazed at how quickly all of the putty sanding areas are just disappearing under that. Still have a rough spot here, and really it depends on how you shine the light on it where the rough spots start to show up. But we got a rough spot here around these 3 lights, and that's to be expected because I can't really sand in between them all that well, but I will finesse that area a little bit. Very happy with how the neck is looking. Get that stray hair off of it. There you go. Very happy with how the central seam is looking. Very happy with the joint of the pylons into the secondary hull. Yeah, coming along very nicely. I will let this dry out here for about half an hour, since it is mighty warm out, but I'll let it dry out here for a while and then bring it back in the house. Okay, one last bit of show and tell for the day, and that was to get a coat of the filler primer on the nacelles. And you can obviously see where there are bumps in the putty that need to be sanded down. But now I can see them a lot easier with a coat of primer on than I could on the bare fiberglass. So everything is blended together. Everything looks wonderful. These still are a little bit wet, so I will leave them sit out here for a bit and then bring them in. But it shows up things I need to tend to, like the gaps between the intercoolers and the body of the nacelle, and some places here where the CA bunched up that I'm not happy about. I'm hoping once I paint that intercooler color, it will minimize that, but I'm not happy with it now. Well, happy hump day one and all, and the day before the 4th of July. I've had so many people ask me, Lou, where do you plan on putting this ship when you're done? Well, let me give you a little history. We are in the display room. This is the room that I had added onto the house shortly after my retirement. And the retirement room was predicated all on one thing. And that one thing was the Enterprise model. That was going to be the centerpiece of my collection, and to this day that's still the plan. Then I had the opportunity to get this chair, which kind of threw everything for a loop, but this is it. There's a pedestal that's built in the center of the room. It's got this lovely stand that comes with, or at least at the time came with the kit for the Enterprise, and this is the first time I've had the completed secondary hull stuck on the actual post. I had been using the building jig post for the longest time, and now I've actually sat it on the actual post. It's got a hemisphere here that needs to be painted like a planet, and this lovely chevron base, and this is rotating on the 1/4-inch jack that will provide the power to it. But this has always been the goal for this room. Now, I have space underneath it now for the Galaxy class, the two Don Shoko kits, the Galaxy class and the Reliant, and I will probably fill the back out here with a refit and the Katinga. The Katinga is done. The refit has not been started. That will probably be one of the next things I build. But this has always been the plan, that this pedestal will house and prominently display this Enterprise. So I hope that answers your questions. Now, what to do with the rest of these kits that have come up over the last 10 years, I don't know, because I'm running out of space. Okay, here's one of the nacelles. I put the first coat of the sealer primer on it, which is a darker gray. First coat of that went on this morning. There's nothing, anybody who's ever built anything scratch built particularly knows that there's nothing harder to build than a smooth cylinder. It will show every little defect. Now it actually looks better now than it did when I was putting the paint on wet, because when the paint is wet, every little bump and ripple jumps right out at you, and when it dries up flat like this, a lot of that stuff disappears. But it did show me that I still have some sanding to do on it to get it smooth enough to make it worth looking at once it's got the final body coloring on it, because that will not be flat. It will have a bit of a satin finish to it, and that's going to show off every ripple and bump in the putty. So still some sanding to do, but it's getting smaller and smaller each time, and that's the goal. You never sand anything perfectly smooth the first time, unless you're some sort of robot. But there you go. It's getting to where I'm happy with it. And the other one is still inside, but it looks much the same. But you can see the difference in the primer color, and this is the raw resin. Well, while everything else is drying in other parts of the house, it's never too early to start on details for the saucer. Now, I have a feeling, just because of everything else I've done so far on this kit, that building the saucer is going to be very much like building a whole separate kit. It's got the same struggles, it's got the same issues as the secondary hull, obviously made of the same materials, it needs the same kind of loving care, but it's almost like, you know, a whole other model that will be joined to the secondary hull. Luckily, the bridge module, as beautifully as this has been molded, is the clear resin, or as clear as it gets. It's not a crystal clear resin, which is a good thing actually, because that would be a nightmare to try to light block. But it also means I don't have to carve out any windows, which is a saving grace for this. All I need to do is mask the windows that are already indented in it, and I can go ahead and put the primer coat over it. It's got this nice semi-clear dome that will go on top, and it's got a tube that will go down in the center so that I can segregate the lighting. Obviously the front window, all of these windows get lit, and then there are two red tiny LEDs on either side. You would think almost it would make more sense if one of them was green and one of them is red, but they are both red. These will be accomplished with a series of strip lights, probably just wrapped around from the inside. I might use this, and well, I'll need this is the light tube to light up the dome. You'll stick a light in, or you stick a bulb in here, and it lights up the top dome. But I may build a little wall here out of strip styrene and something like this. Let me see if I've got a strip here. Sorry, never mind the noise. Something like this here, and then I can put a strip of LEDs around it to light these segments. I might even just, since it's only a question of, you know, you don't have to light the whole thing, just a few here, and up there. I might cut the segments up so that I don't waste light in here where you don't need it. And then we have the bottom planetary sensor, which gets epoxied onto the bottom of the saucer, and it has a semi-clear piece that's got the vanes cast in it, which is a neat feature. You can see them probably easier here, but when you put a light behind it, you will see these. I may even want to draw those in a little darker with a Sharpie or something so that you see that when the light hits it. But that just gets glued into this ring here, and then this whole ring gets attached to the bottom of the saucer with this kind of a light channel on it to keep stray light off of it. But I'm just cleaning these parts up now, and I may put the window masks on this and get a coat of primer on it, and get a coat of primer on this. I'm kind of circling the wagons now while I'm waiting for the circuit to come in, because I can't finish the front deflector area until I've got Ralph's circuit board in. I suppose I could put a coat of primer on the end caps. Those are beautifully cast. I could put the balls on there and get them epoxied in and fit nicely, and then get a coat of primer on that. So I'm looking at things that I can take care of now whilst I wait. Okay, here is an issue that, and once it is an issue, and at the same time it's not really an issue, not for me, and that is the symmetry of the saucer. And the only reason we're getting into that now is because that extends to the symmetry of the bridge, specifically the BC decks and the windows thereupon. I have opted on this model to take the Polar Lights route, which is the, I think, accepted route. And that is to mirror the windows on the starboard side over to the port side. Now, the kit itself, for all its glory, is mired in the actual model, the 11-foot filming miniature methodology of windows on the saucer, not on the secondary hull for some strange reason. They have no problems putting all the windows in the secondary hull that should be there, even though you never saw that side. It's a mirror image of the port side, or the here I go, port and starboard again. The port side, which has no detailing on it, is a mirror of the starboard side. And as far as the maker's intent and people going back to, it's not what the people intended who filmed it, well, they certainly intended it to be symmetrical, and I'll give you one reason why. When they filmed the ship going from right to left, they simply reversed the decals on the NCC 1701 on the nacelle and flopped the film negative. It's an old trick as old as time. You want to make something that's symmetrical, you only have to really build up the detail on half of it, because then you just flip the negative and voila, it's going the other way. But they realized that they had to change the NCC 1701 on the warp engine to show the flipped version. So if that extends to the windows on the secondary hull and on the neck, then it certainly should extend to the rim of the saucer and to the BC deck module. So my mission here, since the kit only shows these two windows, is to in fact put in the rest of them and the other round windows. Well, it helped if it's in camera. I'm trying to keep the camera still, but I don't always keep the subject in camera. As you have these windows, these 4 windows, these 3 portholes, and these 2 portholes up here, what I need to do is duplicate the other 2 missing windows here and the other portholes. So that's what I'm going to do, and then I can get a coat of primer on this. Okay, I think I'm happy with the placement of the windows on the port side of the BC deck. Yes, get used to it. It is the port side. Starboard, port, fore, aft. I'm just going to go with right, left, front, and back. It's easier for me. On the right, I screwed up immediately. On the left side. On the left side, here's the right side. Ship left, not stage left. So now I think I'm ready to go ahead and put a quick coat of primer on this. I've also got ye great balls of warp glued in, so these pieces are ready for priming. I'm going to go ahead and put a little primer on this ring, even though I can't do anything else with it. Let's see, that's about it. Those are the parts that are ready to be primed. Good morning and happy 4th of July to you folks out there in TV land. You know, some people would be out celebrating with their family, having a cookout, taking a boat out on the lake. What am I doing? I'm stuck at home working on my favorite starship, and I couldn't think of a better way to spend the day. I may even join Cloud William in a rousing rendition of the E Plebnista at some point. But right now I am looking at lighting the bridge module. Now, it's had a coat of primer on the outside, and I don't want to load up too many coats of primer on this, or too many coats of paint, but I do need to block the lighting because this was cast out of a clear piece rather than the solid fiberglass of the rest of the kit. So I have painted the outside. I've obviously taped off the windows, but I'm going to do that on the inside as well. These are masks for the windows that I have placed on the inside, and it was easy enough to locate them because I could see straight through to the masks on the outside. So what I'm going to do is put a coat of paint primer on the inside of this, and this will double up on my light blocking ability. The plan is to put a string of maybe not this long of a string, but a string of the warm whites going around the perimeter of the windows. I'm going to put some cool whites. This is the tunnel that goes up to the upper planetary sensor, this guy here. And I want to put a cool white in that so that you get the effect of the warm white windows, but a cool white top of the dome. I think that's going to stand out. The only other cool whites I will use will be on the strobes in the back by the shuttle bay. And of course, the lower planetary sensor will also be cool white. And then the warm whites will stand out more. And then, of course, I've got these little guys, these little red. There's red beacons on either side. And I think I've said before, you know, perhaps more logically speaking, it should be green and red, but we're going to go with the red and red because that's what the ship has. So those will be stuck in from the inside, and I got to make sure I resistor them properly because everything here is going to be 9 volts. I think I can just go ahead and resistor these guys. I've got 1 to practice on and 2 more to actually wire in so that I know my resistors are the appropriate strength. I've got them here marked 100s. I believe that is what the instructions say to use. I will try that out. And then I'll have this as a contained unit that I can kind of keep separate and then wire into the saucer as it is completed and attach it down at once. Now, the instructions, and again, this kit in general, they put a heavy reliance on pinning things. And they don't give you enough meat to put a pin in. They show in the instructions here these little pins sticking down, and they want you to cut this huge gaping hole in the top of the saucer and kind of slide it in and pin it down. I'm not going to do that. I want to keep at least the center. I want to keep the very center of the saucer solid so that I can make my measurements off of that. And I know they say don't do this until you've made all your other measurements and drawn your arcs and your pencil lines and all that. But I don't really see any reason to cut more than a simple tiny hole back here, back of center, to chase wiring through and then glue the bridge down. I don't really want to do all of this pinning. And I'm not going to be doing all of this type of individualized damming of the lights because they're back to using single LEDs rather than, see, they build this whole structure here and then they use single LEDs rather than LED strips. So what I'm going to do is make one superstructure that's basically an inner wall that I can attach this to. And I might put a bottom on that to light block it, so it might look like something like this. Well, you see, these are the bits that come with the kit that are meant to make these little compartments, and that's just not how I'm going to do it. But if I put a strip like this, again, this is not the right one, but if I put a strip like that and then a bottom to it, so that will light block more efficiently, so that I only have light where I need it and eliminate some of the needless light blocking. No sense spilling light where you don't need it. So let me get a quick coat of primer on the bottom of this before I do any additional work. And in other news, the work continues on the nacelles. Every time I putty and sand them, the puttied parts get smaller and smaller to the point where I think I am almost ready to put the final coat of primer on. I reach over here and grab. See, the puttied bits are getting smaller and smaller as I narrow down the areas that need to get puttied on them. And we're almost ready to call these guys done. to the point where they'll be ready for their top coat of paint. And in the secondary hull, I'm about at the same stage. I'm puttying even smaller, but that's boring work, and you don't need to look at it. I'll bring that to you back when I've finished it up. But for today, this is going to be the sexy, exciting work. As you can tell, I'm kind of hopping around here from thing to thing, and I've got the secondary hull back up on its back on the workbench, and this still looks kind of rough, but if you remember anything of what it looked like when I started, this is night and day from how it looked when I started. I've got one little rough patch up in here and one little rough patch in here that I could take the glazing putty to. Now, painting under here is going to be fun. It's just a very tight area. I can't really get files in there easily and sandpaper easily to smooth that off, so I'm working meticulously with the tiny sanding sticks and stuff, but I'll get that sorted out. But I want to put a little bit of spot putty in here. This I am amazed. I am frankly amazed with, knowing how rough that was to start with. I am frankly amazed. And here you'll see I am putting window masks, even though these don't light, but I am getting to the point where I'm building up so much primer on here that I don't want them to look odd and different from the other windows when it comes time to put the final coat of paint on. So I'm going ahead and masking those. I'll paint those black, just like I'll paint a few of these black. But I want them to be defined, as well defined as the other windows. So let me get the primer out, or the spot putty out, and put a little bit on there. I've been working on this kind of off and on all day today, and now I'm back on, and you can see what it looks like with the strip lights in place. And now I need to put the two little red lights and the cool one in there, but that's just a simple strip of a horseshoe of strip lighting, the warm whites. I think it looks great. There you go. Alrighty, there's my last bit of lighting for the day. Let me shut that off, and you can see the red lights are on both sides. This is picking up glow, ambient glow from the inside. I have not isolated it yet and put the cool white in there, but that tells me I'm not going to have to put a lot in there to get the glow that I'm looking for. But there you go, all the way around. And that's my version of fireworks for the 4th of July. Good morning and welcome back. It is the 5th of July. I hope everybody made it out with all of their same number of fingers and toes that they started the day with, and that you didn't get rained out like we did here on the East Coast. I want to talk to you today about the marvels of Fiberfill, the wonders of Fiberfill. What we have here is the tower. This is the unit that I'm going to be putting up under the bridge dome to light it up, and it is a cool white as opposed to so many of the warm whites that are used throughout the rest of the ship. And this is what it looks like when you put the dome over it. Now, it's tough to tell. Boy, I'm really shooting myself in the foot here, because it's, there you go. Maybe you can see it. There's the hot spot that you get, which is no good. But if you take about the size of a cotton ball, you probably could use a cotton ball, a little bit of Fiberfill, and put that in there, and then go back to it, you completely have eliminated that hot spot. And that is the way we will go for the upper bridge dome and the lower planetary sensor dome. We're going to be doing the same thing. You just diffuse the light like that. It's tough to tell unless you're right down on it, but yeah, it's diffuse. And this long piece of handiwork is going to be the blue LED strip that's going in either both of the nacelles. It's going to go in behind the photo etch, and it's going to be on an optional switch so that I can sneak it on for those of us who kind of think it would be a nice idea to have a blue light in the inside trenches of the nacelles, but I can easily turn it off for the purist. You want to know how to get on my bad side really quickly? Make the perfect paint and then stop making it. I guess this would be at least 2 or 3 years ago, I was going through my normal shopping at Lowe's and looking at paint, and I saw this perfect color of paint. Valspar, I don't have the label in front of me, it's Azure Snow Gloss. And I thought, you know, that's just the perfect color for the Enterprise. And so I bought a can of it, squirreled it away, and when it came time to paint, I figured, well, I'll get that can out and see what it looks like. And this is what it looks like. Now, it's a pale, 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 pale bluish green. Back, sorry, I had to answer the phone. It's a very, very pale mint green. It is almost exactly the same color as Round 2 has used for the plastic for the 350 Polar Lights Enterprise kits. So I knew I was in the right ballpark. It photographs a little bit too blue here. It looks a lot better in person, but it looks like the bluish, greenish gray that the model at the Smithsonian does. It's not gray, it's more in the greenish blue, greenish gray family. But I thought, you know, this looks really good as a base. I could, you know, paint on top of that and really do some fine work. And then I go to the store and they don't make it anymore. Not only do they not make it anymore, Lowe's doesn't even carry Valspar spray paint anymore. They carry plenty of house paint, but no spray paint. Should I have gotten 3 or 4 cans of it when I saw it the first time? Yes, because there's no way in God's green earth I can do the whole ship with one spray can. I mean, the saucer alone would take a good chunk of a can. So now I'm stuck. Do I paint the parts that I have with this or what? Well, this is when my little mixing brain got involved. This is what I'm doing. Let me take you out to the porch. Okay, as an example, it is Gloss Azure Snow. Now, the gloss doesn't bother me because I could put a flat coat over it and we're back in business. This is Valspar Color Radiance. This is it. I can't get this anymore. I looked online, looked on eBay, looked on Amazon. I've got about 2/3 of a can left. Went to Michael's, found something called Misty Gray that has a nice chalky finish, and I found this Matt Robbins egg, which is a little too green. But what I've done is I've mixed it on the model. A little bit of robin's egg, a little bit of gray over top of it, a little bit of robin's egg over top of that, and spraying them while they're still wet. So they are melding in with each other. And then, only after that's done, I put the toppiest top coat of a very light dusting of this gloss paint over it to kind of blend everything together. And I think it's turning out pretty good. It's got the gray. Again, it's photographing gray, which is as it should be, but it's in real life, it's got the little bit of the minty green going on that you would see if you looked at the actual model at the Smithsonian. So, oh, hush up, you. Nothing worse than a mockingbird mocking me. I've done the nacelles this way. I've done the bottom of the secondary hull. All I want to do is let that sit for... Would you hush? Do that, let this sit for an hour or so, and then flip it over and do the top part. But you, come back here, you. Okay, we know what this is. We know what the birds think about it. But I think this is going to work. I'm going back inside now. Okay, well here you can see the original color that I sprayed on the bridge dome, and you can see how the nacelle turned out, and I like it. I'm going to let this dry. I don't want to get any fingerprints on it, but I really do take a liking to that. It shows up as a little bit of the brighter bluish. I keep wanting to use blue. It's not blue. It's that greenish gray that we're all familiar with. Okay, here we go with of course the windows are still covered up. And I don't have that circuit plugged in anyway, but there you go. There's take the shade off of it, but there's the bridge lighting and the two red LEDs. Neither of which are all that powerful, which is great, because I'm tired of seeing lights that look like a tanning bed. These are just nice, subtle. You can see the light is on, but you don't have to shield your eyes from it. Okay, here you go. There's the secondary hull with the first coat of that mixture of paint on it. And I'm going to leave it sit like this all weekend, and I think I may wet sand it to see what kind of finish I can get out of that. But it is the mixture that I was doing outside. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, and we'll see how well it ages. At this scale, if you see a splot or drop, it's not as bad as if it were on a very small scale ship. But now that I'm done this, I am seeing things that need to be sanded, little blurgers that I need to take care of. But the important thing is matching the nacelles to this. So I want to make sure that the nacelles are roughly the same color, because you'd kind of like that. And then of course, the big mystery is going to be how to do the saucer, but that's for another day. And well, that's where we're going to end this week with some big color news. Ooh, color of the Enterprise. That's only second to are there grid lines on it as far as matters of controversy. What color it is, what color it is. What you make it the color you saw it on television, or do you make it the color that the prop is? And I'm kind of shooting for a midway down the middle. But my first big experiments with color, and that's all they are, is experiments. I'm not above changing my mind on this. Here's the bridge module, and yes, it looks like it's been attacked by the planet of the Fiberfill, but I'm going to do some wet sanding on this weekend, I think. I'll let this paint dry in quite nicely for a day or so, and let it get nice and hard, and then I may wet sand it to see what kind of finish I can get out of it. And then we'll pick up from here. We're getting to the point where the next big thing to do is to attach the nacelles to the pylons, and that'll be fun. And then all that's left is that huge honking saucer, and that is gonna, like I said, that's like starting from scratch all over again, because you got to go back to boring out the windows and things like that. So until next week, when we pick this right back up, you be good to each other, stay out of the heat, it's miserable outside, and we'll see you here next time.